Somewhere in America right now, a file sits open in a police archive. No suspect, no arrest, no closure. Just a name, a photograph, and a question that has never been answered. Tonight, we're looking at 4 murders that shook the United States. Cases so strange, so carefully hidden, that even with modern DNA technology, they remain completely unsolved. One of them involves a killer who mailed his own confession to the police and vanished. Let's begin. The Zodiac Killer. December 20th, 1968. A quiet lover's lane outside Vallejo, California. 2 teenagers on their first date never made it home. David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were found shot in their car. And no one had any idea it was only the beginning. 6 months later, at Blue Rock Springs, another couple was attacked in almost the same way. This time, one of them survived, giving police the first real description of a killer. But it was the third attack that changed everything. At Lake Berryessa, a man wearing a black executioner's hood with a strange symbol on his chest walked up to 2 college students having a picnic. He calmly tied them up, stabbed them both, then walked back to his car and drove away. One victim survived and described the killer's costume in chilling detail. A costume, investigators believe, designed specifically so he could never be identified. Weeks later, a cab driver named Paul Stein was shot in the back of the head in San Francisco. This time, the killer left behind a piece of blood-stained shirt fabric, and for the first time, gave himself a name. In a letter to 3 Bay Area newspapers, he called himself the Zodiac, and included a cipher he claimed would reveal his identity if solved. Over the following months, the letters kept coming, taunting detectives, threatening to attack a school bus, mocking the investigation in the press. Each was signed with the same symbol, a circle cut through by crosshairs. Inside, some of them were more ciphers. One, called Z408, was cracked within days by a school teacher and his wife working the puzzle by hand. It revealed a rambling, disturbing message, but no name. 2 more ciphers, Z13 and Z32, remained unsolved for decades. One of them wasn't cracked until 2020, by a team of amateur code breakers working independently. It still didn't name the killer. Investigators have chased down thousands of suspects since 1969. Arthur Lee Allen was investigated for years and remains the most famous person of interest. But DNA testing on preserved evidence never definitively linked him to the crimes. In 2021, a group calling itself the Case Breakers announced they'd identified the Zodiac as a man named Gary Post. Already deceased, the FBI publicly rejected the claim within a day, stating the investigation remains open. To this day, the Zodiac Killer's identity has never been confirmed by law enforcement. He claimed to have killed as many as 37 people. Only 5 deaths are officially attributed to him. The man who wanted so badly to be seen, who mailed his own taunts to the press, was never seen at all. The Black Dahlia, Los Angeles, January 15th, 1947. A woman walking with her young daughter spots what she first thinks is a broken mannequin in a vacant lot. It wasn't a mannequin. The victim was 22-year-old Elizabeth Short. a young woman who had come to Los Angeles hoping to break into the movies. The press quickly gave her a nickname, the Black Dahlia. For her dark hair and the black clothing she was known to favor. What had been done to her body was so extreme, so deliberately staged, that even homicide detectives with decades of experience were visibly shaken. It appeared less like an act of rage and more like something the killer had planned and posed. The investigation became a media circus almost overnight. Newspapers ran daily updates, sometimes inventing details to keep readers hooked. In the weeks that followed, more than 60 people walked into police stations to confess to the murder. Most of them, investigators concluded, were seeking attention or genuinely delusional. Not one of them had information only the real killer could have known. Detectives built a list of over 100 serious suspects. Doctors, ex-boyfriends, con artists, even a physician who had once treated Short and later died by suicide. Years later, a retired LAPD homicide detective named Steve Hodel became convinced his own father, a physician with alleged ties to Short, was the killer, and wrote several books making the case. The theory remains widely debated, but no formal charges were ever filed against anyone, living or dead. The LAPD has periodically revisited the file over the decades, most recently re-examining physical evidence with modern forensic tools. Nearly 80 years later, the Black Dahlia case is still, technically, an open homicide investigation. Elizabeth Short's killer was never identified, and possibly never will be. JonBenét Ramsey, Boulder, Colorado. The morning after Christmas, 1996. 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey's mother calls 911 at 5:52 a.m., frantic. Her daughter is missing from her bed. In her hand is a ransom note, nearly 3 handwritten pages long, demanding a strangely specific sum. $118,000, almost the exact amount of her father's recent work bonus. Investigators would later call it one of the strangest ransom notes in American criminal history. Too long, too personal, and written on paper from inside the family's own home. Hours later, while police searched the house, JonBenét's father made a discovery no parent should ever have to make. His daughter's body in the basement. The kidnapper described in the note had never taken her anywhere. She had never left the house at all. What followed was one of the most publicly scrutinized investigations of the 1990s. JonBenét had competed in children's beauty pageants, and the resulting photographs fueled a tabloid frenzy that often overshadowed the actual evidence. Handwriting analysts compared the ransom note to samples from family members and disagreed with each other. In 1999, a grand jury actually voted to indict both parents on charges of child abuse, resulting in death. But the Boulder County District Attorney declined to prosecute, citing insufficient evidence. That indictment stayed sealed for years. In 2008, everything shifted. Touch DNA recovered from the scene. A genetic profile belonging to an unknown male didn't match any member of the Ramsey family. The district attorney's office formally, publicly cleared them. Attention turned toward the possibility of an unknown intruder, a theory the family had maintained from the very beginning. In the years since, JonBenét's father has repeatedly and publicly pushed investigators to run the unidentified DNA through modern genetic genealogy databases. The same technique that has cracked dozens of other cold cases. As of today, no confirmed match has been announced. JonBenét Ramsey's murder remains formally unsolved. The Boy in the Box. Philadelphia, February 25th, 1957. A young man checking his muskrat traps in a wooded area stumbles onto a cardboard box, half hidden in the brush. Inside is the body of a boy, no older than 6, wrapped in a cheap blanket. He has no name. No missing person report matches him. No one comes forward. Not that week, not that year, not for decades. Detectives did everything they could think of. They printed thousands of flyers with his photograph and mailed them to schools, hospitals, and police departments across the country. They exhumed his body more than once as forensic science advanced, hoping new techniques might finally reveal who he was. Officers who worked the case in the 1950s eventually retired and passed the file to the next generation of detectives, who inherited it like an unfinished promise. For over 60 years, he was known only as America's Unknown Child. A local police captain was so moved by the case that he arranged and paid for a proper burial. And for years, officers voluntarily visited the grave. Investigators considered hundreds of leads. Some believed he'd been a foster child, moved between homes with no official record. Others thought his family had fled the area entirely after his death. None of it led anywhere solid enough to identify him. Until genetic genealogy entered the picture. In 2019, a non-profit group specializing in cold cases took on his DNA, using the same family tree matching techniques that have identified serial killers. And Jane and John Does across the country, they slowly built out branches of a family that had never come forward. In December 2022, 65 years after he was found, they had an answer. His name was Joseph Augustus Zarelli, but naming him only solved half the mystery. To this day, no one has been charged with his death, the identity of whoever placed him in that box, and the family that apparently never reported a child missing remains completely unknown. Joseph finally has his name back. His killer still doesn't have one. 4 cases, 4 families, or in one case, a boy with no family who ever came forward, still waiting. In every one of them, the evidence exists. DNA, letters, fingerprints, ciphers, but the final piece never quite falls into place. Cold case units haven't given up. Genetic genealogy has cracked cases that once seemed permanently frozen. So maybe one day, one of these files finally closes. Until then, they stay open, waiting. If you want part 2, 5 more unsolved cases most people have never heard of, let me know in the comments. And if this kept you up a little later than you planned, you know what to do.